The U.S. has made another move. In August 2025, the Trump administration officially announced tariffs of up to 50% on India and Brazil, and issued a warning. Any country that supports BRICS anti-U.S. policies will face an additional 10% tariff, with no exceptions. What began as a de-dollarization battle in the financial sphere has now escalated into an all-out conflict involving the real economy and technological supply chains. At the same time, U.S. employment data plunged, and the market expects the Federal Reserve may shift towards rate cuts. Monetary policy is swinging back and forth, internal divisions are deepening, and America is under unprecedented pressure. The situation is no longer just about tariffs. It's currency, supply chains, and geopolitics, all going to war at once. In this video, we'll cover what challenges is the US dollar's dominance facing? How is America fighting back? What moves have they made? In an era of policy flip-flops, institutional division, and global transformation, how can regular investors protect themselves? In recent years, de-dollarization has stopped being just a slogan and has become concrete action. After BRICS expansion, the bloc now covers half of the world's population, and by purchasing power parity, over 35% of global GDP. They have launched the BRICS Pay cross-border payment system, promoted local currency trade, and replaced dollar-denominated loans with their own currencies. Russia has stated that over 90% of its foreign trade is no longer settled in US dollars. IMF data also shows that the dollar's share of global central bank reserves has dropped from over 70% in the early 2000s to just 58% by 2022. These changes have shaken the three main pillars of US dollar hegemony. The world's dominant trade settlement currency, the primary tool for financial sanctions, the top choice for central bank reserves. All three pillars are now starting to loosen. That's why the US has been taking countermeasures, expanding the battlefield outward. Beyond China, Trump has now pulled BRICS members India and Brazil into the fray, slapping tariffs of up to 50% on them, aiming to force them to pick a side between the US and China, and to fracture the BRICS bloc. On August 6, 2025, Trump announced a 100% tariff on all imported chips and semiconductors. But companies could be exempt if they promise to manufacture in the US. The logic is clear: use tariffs to punish imports, force supply chains back to America, and rebuild control over strategic industries. The chip war is no longer just about blocking China, it's about seizing full technological leadership. On monetary policy, Trump favors rate cuts and a weaker dollar, arguing that a strong dollar hurts US exports and benefits China. His goal is to weaken the dollar to stimulate exports and promote industrial reshoring. The problem is, America's own institutions are divided. The Federal Reserve is an independent body, not under presidential control. Chair Jerome Powell has long leaned toward fighting inflation and keeping rates high. After COVID, China rapidly restored production capacity, while the yuan remained weak. Meanwhile, costs in Europe, the US, and Southeast Asia have risen, and inflation has persisted. China began dumping ultra-low-priced goods onto the global market: cars, batteries, solar modules, home appliances, textiles, and more, especially targeting mid-price markets in Europe, Latin America, and Africa. The US aimed to encircle China, but instead found itself caught off guard. Then came non-farm payroll that shifted the game again. In July 2025, the US added only 73,000 jobs, far below expectations. The figures for May and June were sharply revised down, cutting over 250,000 jobs in total. San Francisco Fed President Mary Daly said multiple upcoming meetings could include discussions on rate cuts. Fed Governors Waller and Bowman went further, unusually supporting an immediate 25 basis point cut. Markets reacted instantly. Rate cut odds for September surged above 90%. But the issue? Inflation isn't truly under control. As of June 2025, headline inflation was still 2.7%, with core inflation at 2.9%. That's still above the Fed's 2% target, and labor costs, geopolitical risks, and other pressures remain unsettled. Cutting rates now would release liquidity and push up demand, potentially bringing inflation roaring back. The outcome could be the whole world suffers from higher prices again. In the short term, the dollar still dominates. Around 80% of world trade is settled in US dollars. 58% of global central bank reserves are dollar-denominated, but the cost of maintaining hegemony is climbing. Relying on rate cuts to keep the dollar attractive, using high tariffs to punish other countries, controlling supply chains to suppress rivals, all while domestic policy swings back and forth with no consensus. Hegemony is no longer based on trust, it's being propped up by force. It used to rest on institutions, now it depends on intervention. At this point, you might be asking, as an ordinary person or investor, how should you respond? Markets move every day, but shifts in the underlying system can't be predicted with technical charts. Start by asking yourself one question. Is your entire portfolio betting on the US dollar will always be fine? Some people choose to diversify part of their holdings outside of a single system. Especially in today's tug-of-war between dollar hegemony and de-dollarization, the key isn't to pick a winner, it's to ask, are there assets that neither side can control? If you're worried inflation might rebound, you should think even harder. What assets can hold value without relying on trust in currency or institutions? One option is real estate, especially REITs. Over the past 20 years, REIT dividends were lower than inflation in only 2 years. During periods of moderate to high inflation, overall returns have been positive. From 2023-2024, top REITs surged plus 84%, and ETFs returned plus 20 to 29%. While rents push up CPI, real estate becomes an inflation beneficiary. Other possible non-dollar assets include gold. Trusted globally even in institutional turmoil, the longest-standing safe haven asset in history. Precious metals, for example, silver, platinum, physical in nature, not reliant on credit systems. Bitcoin belongs to no country, can't be frozen, offers digital asset sovereignty, but carries structural risks. Neutral country assets, for example, Swiss francs, physical gold trusts, Singapore insurance-based products. The key isn't predicting when the system will change, it's, does your portfolio include assets that can exist without institutional trust? The truth is, no one can predict when a system will swerve or when a policy will turn. But if all your assets are built on the trust of a single central system or central bank, you need to ask yourself, if it's no longer neutral, can your strategy still work? Some people choose to start diversifying, seeking assets that are not dependent on institutions, not tied to any country, but trusted worldwide for the long term. In recent years, as institutional trust has begun to erode, many countries, when introducing new systems, first moved to buy gold. For BRICS, the goal is local currency trade and breaking free from US dollar influence. But how do you gain credibility? The most practical, neutral bargaining chip is gold. Gold doesn't rely on credit, can't default, and can't be frozen. It can be trusted under any system. The US dollar, in contrast, has never been backed by gold, it relies on the system. Today, gold has become the only stable asset that can exist without institutional trust. To me, gold isn't just a hedge, it's the only asset that can still carry trust when systems shift. If you're thinking beyond short-term trades and technical levels, and instead about the trust behind the system itself, you'll understand naturally, gold has always been here.